Hey kids, this is chapter 22, Thorn Valley, from Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim. If you haven't listened to chapter 21, please stop now and go listen to that chapter first. Thorn Valley. It might almost be easier to tell you what wasn't in it, Nicodemus continued. That truck was as roomy as a small bus, and the old man hadn't wasted a single foot of it. Not that it was cluttered. On the contrary, everything was neatly in place on its shelf, or hook, or in its cabinet. Now, if you remember, in the previous chapter, the rats and the mice came upon a truck, and there was a man who had died that was a toy tinker that fixed and repaired and made toys of all kinds. And for some reason, his truck was in the park where they were. And they found him dead, and they made him a grave. And now they're going into the toy tinker's truck. It took us a while to understand what a treasure we had found. The truck contained, as you might expect, a big stock of toys. It also contained the old man's simple living quarters, a cot, a lamp, a work table, a folding chair, a bucket for carrying water, a plate, pots, pans, and so on. There was a tiny refrigerator with food in it, and some canned stuff, peas, beans, peaches, things like that. Most of the toys, we thought at first, we had no particular use for. They were toy automobiles and trucks, windmills and merry-go-rounds, airplanes, boats, and a lot of others, mostly run on batteries. It was entertaining to look at them, and some of them we even tried out. For a while, the floor looked like Christmas morning. We tired of that and explored farther into the truck. Up near the front, we found several large cardboard boxes. And when we opened them, we found that they were full of electric motors of assorted sizes, replacement engines for broken or worn-out toys. There were dozens of them, ranging from very small, no bigger than a spool of thread, up to some so heavy we could hardly move them. And here they are, exploring the boxes. Pretty cool, huh, to come across all these rat-sized objects. Then, next to these, we found the real treasure, the old man's tools. They were neatly arranged in shining rows inside a steel cabinet as big as the truck. There were screwdrivers, saws, hammers, clamps, vices, wrenches, pliers. There were welding tools, soldering irons, and electric drills. And the beauty of it was, since they were designed for working on toys, they were nearly all miniature, easily small enough for us to handle. Yet they were themselves not toys. They were made of the finest tempered steel, like the tools of a watchmaker or a dentist. It was Arthur who said it first. "Do you realize what we've got here? We could open our own machine shop. With these tools and all these motors, we could make anything we wanted." "We could," said Jenner, "except you've forgotten one thing." "What's that?" "We have no electricity." The old man couldn't have run these tools off batteries. The small toy motors, yes, but not the real ones, not the power tools. He had to plug it into a house current to use those. See, there's his extension cord on the wall. There was a long coil of heavy black cable hanging from a hook on the wall. It had a plug on one end and a socket on the other. Now another rat spoke up, a rat named Sullivan. He was a great friend of Arthur's, and like him, had a particular interest in engines and electricity. Maybe, he said, we could plug into a house current too. How? I said. Who'd let us? Do you remember that cave we looked at the other day? The one we decided was too close to the farmhouse? That was the beginning of it. The end you have seen yourself. He was speaking of the cave you saw today. We all trooped back to it and examined it more carefully. It was too close, or at least closer than we had planned to live to a human habitation. But then we saw the huge rose bush near the tractor shed, where, with quite a lot of digging, we could put a concealed entrance. But most important, we noticed that there was an electric light in the tractor shed. Mr. Fitzgibbon had an underground power cable leading out from his house to the shed. We dug a tunnel to it, tapped it, and we had all the electricity we needed. Near it, we ran a water pipe. We tapped that too, and we had running water. Then a few at a time, we moved the tools and the motors from the toy tinker's truck to the cave. We got nearly all of them before the truck disappeared. We went back one day and it was gone. Only the hole remained, where its tire had been sunk. The forest rangers must have found it and hauled it away, but they never discovered or disturbed the mound where the old man laid buried. So we built ourselves the life you see around us. Our colony thrived and grew to 115. We taught our children to read and write. We had plenty to eat. Running water, electricity, a fan to draw in fresh air, an elevator, a refrigerator. Deep underground, our home stayed warm in winter and cool in summer. It was a comfortable, almost luxurious existence. And yet, all was not well. After the first burst of energy, the moving in of the machines, the digging of the tunnels and the rooms, after that was done, a feeling of discontent settled upon us, like some creeping disease. We were reluctant to admit it at first. We tried to ignore the feeling or to fight it off by building more things, bigger rooms, fancier furniture, carpeted hallways, things we did not really need. I was reminded of a story I had read at the Boniface estate when I was looking for things written about rats. It was about a woman in a small town who bought a vacuum cleaner. Her name was Mrs. Jones, and up until then, she, like all of her neighbors, had kept her house spotlessly clean by using a broom and a mop. But the vacuum cleaner did it faster and better, and soon Mrs. Jones was the envy of all the other housewives in town. So they bought the vacuum cleaners too. The vacuum cleaner business was so brisk, in fact, that the company that made them opened a branch factory in the town. The factory used a lot of electricity. Of course, and so did the women with their vacuum cleaners. So the local electric power company had to put up a big new plant to keep them all running. In its furnaces, the power plant, and that's not a plant like a plant that grows in soil. A power plant is like a big power factory where power is made. A big new power plant to keep them all running. In its furnaces, the power plant burned coal, and out of its chimneys, black smoke poured day and night, blanketing the town with ashes and making all the floors dirtier than ever. Still, by working twice as hard and twice as long, the women of the town were able to keep their floors almost as clean as they had been before Mrs. Jones ever bought a vacuum cleaner in the first place. The story was part of a book of essays, and the reason I had read it so eagerly was that it was called The Rat Race, which I learned means a race where no matter how fast you run, you don't get anywhere. But there was nothing in the book about rats. And I felt bad about the title because I thought it wasn't a rat race at all. It was a people race. And no sensible rats would ever do anything so foolish. And yet, here we were, rats, getting caught up in something a lot like the people race, and for no good reason. And the worst thing was that even with our make-work projects, we didn't really have enough to do. Our life was too easy. I thought of what the scientists had written about our prairie dog ancestors, and I was worried. So were many of the others. We called a meeting, indeed, a whole series of meetings, extending over more than a year. We talked and argued and considered, and we remembered our evenings in the library at the Boniface estate when we had wondered what a rat civilization would be like. Oddly enough, Jenner, my old and best friend, took little part in these discussions. He remained rather glumly silent and seemed disheartened. But most of the others felt as I did, and slowly some things became clear. We saw our problem as we figured out, as well as we could, what to do about them. First, we realized that finding the toy tinker's truck, which had seemed like such an enormous stroke of good luck, had in fact led us into the very trap we should have avoided. As a result, we were now stealing more than ever before, not only food, but electricity and water. Even the air we breathed was drawn in by a stolen fan, run by a stolen current of electricity. It was this, of course, that made our life so easy that it seemed pointless. We did not have enough work to do because a thief's life is always based on somebody else's work. Second, there was always the fear in the back of all of our minds that we might get caught, or perhaps not caught. We thought precautions against that so much as found out. Mr. Fitzgibbon was surely aware that some of his crops were being removed. And as our group grew larger, we would have to take more and more. Already, he had begun lining some of his grain bins with steel metal. That didn't bother us particularly because we knew how to get the doors open. But suppose he should take to locking the doors. We could cut through the locks, of course, or even through the sheet metal walls. We have the tools for that. But it would be a dead giveaway. What would Mr. Fitzgibbon think about rats who could cut through metal? All these things we worried about and talked about and puzzled over. But we could not find any easy answer because there was none. There was, however, a hard answer. And that's the end of part 1 of Thorn Valley.